Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. I'm so happy we can meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing Tyler Hadley. When Tyler Hadley was 17 years old, he brutally murdered both of his parents, hid their bodies in their own bedroom, and then threw a huge party. Okay? A huge party while his parents' dead bodies were in the bedroom. Yeah. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell because I put out a new Morbid makeup video every single week and I would love it if you would hang out with me. Yes, you, specifically you. So go ahead and do that. Subscribe, join us, and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And if you want, you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. Now guys, oh my God, I have news. Okay, this video is very special because, wait for it, can you guess what it is? I have my very first sponsor. Oh my God, can you believe that? Me, a sponsoree? I feel #blessed. No, but really, when I tell you that I am just feeling very, very happy and so just like proud, and I know there's so many of you that are just so dope and will support any sponsor I do, but listen, when I tell you that this sponsor is perfect for me, let me tell you what. Today's video is sponsored by Bright Cellars, and do you know how much I love wine? Bro, do you know how much I love wine? So Bright Cellars is a monthly wine club that helps match you with wines that you will love. So basically what you do is you go on their website, you take a little quiz, you answer some questions like what kind of chocolate you could eat for the rest of your life, where you like to drink your wine, you know, whether you like to have it with like a fancy meal or at like a kickback with friends. Guess which one I chose. They also ask you like, what is your go-to alcoholic drink if it's not wine? But real quick, with Bright Cellars, you probably will never run out of wine, so that'll be kind of irrelevant. Then, with the answers of your quiz, Bright Cellars takes your taste preferences and matches you with 6 bottles of wine that you're most likely to love. And let me tell you, when I say that I love this, because I've always been like a $2 Chuck type of girl, you know, I go into the store and I'm like, can you give me your $10th bottle of wine, please? And lately I've been even more lazy than that, and I've just been going in and looking at labels and just picking what label appeals to me. But lately I'm really anxious at the grocery store because I feel like if there's anyone too close to me, I'm like, get away from me. And I don't want to get on my phone and Google whether or not I'm gonna like it, because that's what I typically do. Look at the label, pick a label, I'm like, am I gonna like this? Bright Cellars does that for me and I appreciate the ease. Okay, so look at these bottles. First off, look how they're packaged. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. 1 row, 2 row. That's amazing. And look at these labels. First off, this one has a pig and this one has a bear. And, okay, wait, let me show you these little cards that they send, because let me tell you, these are helpful. Wait a minute. They also send you these freaking little cards, dude, and watch. On the back of the card, they tell you the notes, the profile, the temperature to serve it, the foods to serve it with, and most importantly for me, that alcohol content. Because when I'm buying a wine, I'm like, okay, what's the cheapest bottle of wine I can get with the highest alcohol content, please, and make it red? Thank you. So, if you're like me, and after a long day of binging really, really heavy true crime content, you wanna like lay in the bath, or lay in the bed, or just chill on the couch and sip on some wine, I've got some very good news for you. Bright Cellars is offering members of the Brat Pack 50% off of their first 6 bottle box, okay? That makes each bottle of wine less than $10. And let me tell you, I already went online because I want to do the research for you, and I Googled how much these bottles of wine cost, and let me tell you, they're a lot more than $10 each if you were to buy them individually. Okay, so if you want to take advantage of this killer offer and get some personally curated wines just for you to sit and sip on when you're chilling, not killing, go to brightcellars.com/BRATTERSTEIN or just click the link in my description box, which I promise to remember to put for you, okay? I promise. I know I always forget, but I will. And you know what I'll do in about a month, so I can give you guys time if you choose to get wine to actually get it delivered to your home. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna schedule a YouTube live so we can get on and we can sip our wines and we can talk about crime and life, whatever you want, because I honestly and truly really, really appreciate any and all support that I get from you. So I wanna do that, and we can drink wine together. We can chill, not kill, okay? Okay. Okay, so I know it's gonna be hard to move past that super exciting news because honestly, I'm just like very happy about it, but we have to bring it down like a lot and talk about Tyler Hadley's case. And let me tell you, this case is wild. So I had heard about this case a while ago. I remember hearing about it, but I never wrote the name down and I never looked into it too thoroughly because at the time that I first learned about it, I wasn't doing YouTube. So recently I was chilling on the internet and all of a sudden I crossed paths with Tyler Hadley again. Not like in person, obviously, but just like surfing through the true crime waves of the internet. And I was like, wait a minute. So I started looking into it and I got very into it. So then after I found myself thoroughly interested, I went on YouTube and I searched for YouTube videos to see if it was completely oversaturated. And I found that there are hardly any YouTube videos on this case, which is crazy to me because homeboy straight up murdered both of his parents so that he could throw a rager. It was just so wild and so brutal, and the way he killed them and the way he acted after and the amount of people that he had told he was going to do this that did nothing about it and that just continued to party with him is just insane. But I guess I should just get into this and tell you about it. So come, gather around and let me tell you the story of Tyler Hadley and his killer party. So let me set the scene a little bit for you here. We're gonna head to Port St. Lucie, Florida. It's on the southern coast of Florida, and it's an area that was once a lot of swampland, but has since been developed. Not totally, you'll like go see one house, see another house, and see a bunch of undeveloped like swamp land, at least at that time. But it had been converted into like a suburb area with lots of shops, lots of kids, and not really much to do. And this is where 17-year-old Tyler Hadley would commit his horrible crime. Tyler Hadley was born December 16th, 1993, making him a Sagittarius, and he was the youngest of 2 boys. He and his older brother Ryan, who is 6 years older than him, were born to Mary-Jo Hadley, their mother, who was an elementary school teacher, and Blake Hadley, their father, who was a watch engineer at a nuclear power plant and had worked there for 30 years at the time that he died. Mary-Jo and Blake were both described as just being really, really kind and great people. Their older son, Ryan, described them as great parents and just awesome. Strictly awesome. In his younger years, Tyler was actually described similarly. He was described as a nice kid, a friendly kid, a polite kid that loved his family, loved his parents, and loved his brother. Growing up, Tyler liked to skateboard, he loved to ride his bike, he loved to play football, swimming, things like that. He was the type of kid that said, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. And he was the kind of kid that was trusted enough that he would house sit for neighbors when they would go away for a weekend. The family was very close when the boys were young. When Tyler was little, he would wait up for his dad to come home after he was working late night shifts at the power plant, and the two would often play basketball in the driveway. They had a basketball hoop, and sometimes they would even play till after midnight if it was a day where Blake got home particularly late from the plant. And in the summers, the family would always swim together in the family pool in the backyard, just splashing and laughing. They just really seemed to love each other, which is just so sad considering the type of video that we're filming right now, you know? Everything was like fine with Tyler and with the family until he entered high school. At about the age of 15, he started to get a little bit of an attitude. There started to be a lot more arguments. Tyler, like many kids in the area, was really bored and really restless, and like a lot of kids do when they're bored and restless, they start getting into a little bit of trouble. Blake and Mary-Jo seemed, at least at first, to be sort of in denial about the dark path, the bad path that Tyler was going down. At one point, a neighbor had seen Tyler smoking and like went to Mary-Jo and was like, yo, I saw him smoking, which, you know, cigarettes are bad for you kids, they kill. And at first Mary-Jo was like, no, that couldn't have been Tyler, he doesn't smoke. And when she was pressed, she's like, no, dude, like for sure it was Tyler, I know Tyler, I saw Tyler. She was like, what are you gonna do? You know, I don't know. But soon it became clear that the path that Tyler was going down wasn't just like regular teenage stuff, but it was also dangerous stuff. He started hanging out with a bad crowd, a druggy crowd, you know, and he started getting into drugs himself, experimenting a little bit, dabbling more than marijuana, more than just the ganja. Tyler and his friends just started kind of screwing around together, but progressively they got a little worse and a little worse. And at one point they even took like an abandoned couch that somebody had left outside, dragged it into a wildlife park, which is a park. There's trees and shit. Doused it in gasoline and set it on fire. They were caught for this, but they only got a warning. But this was just a step towards the escalation. So as things did escalate, it got harder and harder for his family to ignore the fact that his issues were more serious. In one occasion, he had actually broke into a house, got caught and got charged with burglary. In another instance, he had been at a party with his friends and he got like way too drunk. He was in Foo Bar City, and he went back to his friend's house and he peed all over his friend's bed, which is like party foul, not a cool move, Tyler Hadley. And his mom ended up finding out about this and was like, okay, you have like a substance abuse problem, child. So she ended up sending him to a mental health and substance abuse program to just try to like get him some help, see what was wrong with him, see what she could be doing to make it better. And during this time, she was asked, like, do you think that he would hurt you? And she said no, that she was more worried that he would end up hurting himself. In April of 2011, just 2 months before the murders, Tyler ended up getting in a fist fight, a physical fight at least, at a friend's house, and the cops ended up being called, and he was charged with aggravated battery. So his parents were pissed with all the other stuff he had been doing, all the other ways he had been screwing around, and they were like giving him a chance, giving him a chance, giving him a chance. This one was too much because not only had he gotten arrested, but he got 2 weeks of house arrest for this. So his mom was like, that's it. If you're going to be stuck in the house, you're not going to have your phone either. And she took his cell phone away, and which I think is a pretty reasonable response to what he had been doing. No? Yeah, for sure. To his peers, Tyler was just known as being kind of weird, mostly quiet, but he would have sudden energetic outbursts, nothing too odd, just a little bit of a weird kid. He only had a few close friends and was by no means a popular kid at Port St. Lucie High School, where he was attending high school. The people he did know, he often lied to about his parents, which was weird, maybe to garner sympathy or maybe just to seem interesting. I'm not really sure why, but he would tell people that his parents would put him under a lot of pressure. He told people that Blake wasn't his real dad, which wasn't true, and he would tell people that Blake physically abused him. All of these accusations, by the way, are things that his older brother Ryan has come out to say are just complete bullshit lies, and that his parents were awesome and that his brother is a pathological liar. So the thing with Tyler that I found interesting is he seemed, as he was getting close to the murders, he seemed like he was going through phases where at one point he'd feel a lot of rage and resentment towards his parents, but then almost immediately after he would feel bad for arguing with them or raising his voice or hurting their feelings. In one account I read that had happened pretty close to the murders where he had told a friend about this. He had been arguing with his mom and he had told her to shut up, which my mom would have knocked me across the room. Anyway, he told her to shut up and immediately afterwards felt bad for it, felt bad for hurting her feelings and apologized immensely for doing that and like stopped fighting with her. He's like, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that. And just seemed to actually care about hurting her feelings. In another account, he was talking to a friend on Mother's Day and he was saying that he felt really bad because when he got put on house arrest, his mom was so disappointed that she cried, which he said that he felt bad for hurting her and he felt bad for making her cry. And the friend was like, oh, what'd you do for her today since it's Mother's Day? And he said that he and his brother had taken her out to eat and that it was a really nice day. And this was in May and the murders happened in July. So it's just really heartbreaking to see that there was something good there and it just ended in the way that it did. And another thing that's so sad is just 2 weeks before the murder, Mary-Jo had been talking to some friends and it said that Tyler was getting so much better, that he was over the hurdle that he had been having such trouble with, and that she felt like he was getting back to himself and she was so happy about it, which is just like gutting to read and to know and then just be like, in 2 weeks, he's gonna literally take her life. And it's just, she seems like she did nothing wrong. You know what I mean? Like, nothing is ever deserving of being killed, but she really just seemed like such a good person. Which is always people who get killed, right? In the summer of 2011, Tyler Hadley decided he wanted to have a big party. So, in the week before the inevitable murders, Tyler started going around school telling anyone who would listen, people he didn't know, just anyone he came in contact with, that he was going to be having a party and that people should be ready for it. But everyone was like, okay, sure, dude. I believe that. But nobody did believe that because Tyler wasn't the kid to do that. He had never had a party before. His parents weren't the type to just like let him have a party, but he said his parents were going to be out of town and that it was happening. The morning of the party, Tyler started texting his friends, letting them know, like, this was the day, it was happening. And his friends were like, what? And one friend in particular named Antonio was like, what? How is this happening? Are your parents going to be home? And Tyler said, nope. Well, they're leaving soon. Tyler. It's not cool. That afternoon at approximately 1:15, Tyler went online to Facebook. This was when Facebook was poppin', and he posted to his wall. The post simply said, party tonight, ... maybe. By 8:15 that night, it was certain. This party was happening. He went on Facebook and he posted again on his wall and he put, party tonight at my place, hit me up. And his friends were like, what? This is crazy. This is actually happening. And one friend wrote him and said, what if your parents come home? And he said, and I quote, they won't. Trust me. No. On July 16th, 2007, in Port St. Lucie, Florida, 17-year-old Tyler Hadley murdered his parents Mary-Jo Hadley and Blake Hadley. Shortly before 5 p.m. that fateful day, Tyler took his parents' cell phones and he hid them so that if things didn't go according to plan, they would not be able to call for help. He then took 3 ecstasy pills, which, whoa Nelly, that's a lot of ecstasy, but he said later that he didn't think he'd be able to go through with the murders if he was sober. So he took the ecstasy pills and he listened to some hype music to get ready for what he planned to do. Once he had made up his mind, and he was sure and he was ready, he grabbed a claw hammer and went looking for his parents. He found his mother first. 47-year-old Mary-Jo was sitting at the family computer doing some work on the computer, and she didn't hear her son come up behind her. So he stood behind her. He stood behind her for a full 5 minutes just getting ready for what he was about to do. Maybe he wasn't sure if he was going to do it. Maybe he was just like getting up the nerve, but he stood behind her silently for 5 minutes holding a hammer. He finally made his decision, a decision that he could never take back, a decision that is absolutely unforgivable, and he brought down the claw end of the hammer onto his mother's head and beat her repeatedly. Blake, Tyler's father, was home at the time and he heard Mary-Jo screaming and ran from his bedroom to see what had happened, and this is when he saw his youngest son murdering his wife. Mary-Jo's last words were, "Why? Why?" Tyler and his father made direct eye contact before his father charged him. Tyler was much smaller than his father. His dad was a big dude. He was 6'1" and about 300 pounds. But Tyler was on drugs and he had the hammer. His father simply asked him why, and Tyler said in response, "Why the fuck not?" Eventually, Tyler did get the upper hand in the scuffle between him and his father, and he murdered his father, 54-year-old Blake Hadley, by beating him with the claw end of the hammer, all the while saying over and over, "Why the fuck not?" Tyler then wrapped his parents' heads in towels and then dragged them into their own bedroom. He laid them on the ground, side by side, face down, with the claw hammer on the ground between their bodies. He then spent 3 hours cleaning up the crime scene. He said it was a lot more intense than he expected it to be, and it took a lot longer than he thought it would. He then put all of the items that he couldn't properly clean in the bedroom on top of his parents' bodies. They were just buried under just so much stuff. Like, I'm going to include crime scene photos so you can see, not anything too intense, nothing with bodies or anything, maybe a smidge of blood, but there was so much stuff piled on top of these 2 people. It's horrible. And then Tyler took a shower. And after the shower, he stood in the mirror, looked at his reflection, and laughed. Like, hysterically laughed. After this, Tyler got on Facebook and he posted to his wall, as I said, that the party was on. He had been saying that it might be happening, but now it definitely was. It was confirmed. It was going to pop off. Tyler left his house. He stopped at the ATM and pulled $5,000 out of his dead parents' bank accounts. He then went and picked up a couple friends and headed back to his place to get the party started. The party started at about 11:30 p.m. and it was a rager. There were anywhere between 60 and 100 people there that night, and most of them did not even know Tyler. People had just heard, like, through the grapevine that there was a wild party. Like, it'd be one person who would know Tyler and they'd get there and be like, "Oh shit, this is kind of fun." So they would text people and they'd be like, "Well, there's like a wild party over at this guy Tyler's house. You should come over." And it just went down the grapevine, word of mouth. And they were like, "Well, it's Saturday. This town has nothing to do. Let's all mob over to this party." I don't know if the fact that people were there that Tyler didn't know would seem weird to anybody, like if you grew up in a bigger place, but where I grew up, it was like a small area like this, undeveloped, not much to do. And like we would drive to LA when we wanted stuff to do because there was nothing to do where I grew up. And this is exactly how it went. We would just end up at random people's parties playing beer pong in somebody's garage that you didn't know that well. That's just how it went. So this doesn't sound that weird to me, but in case it sounds weird to you, it's common in like little shit towns where there's nothing to do. During the party, Tyler seemed pretty nervous. Maybe this is because he was still tripping on ecstasy. Maybe this is because he had just murdered 2 people. Maybe it's a little column A. Maybe it's a little column B. But people said that he seemed very nervous, very like, when they'd show up to the party. And his only rule, which was an odd one, was not to smoke in the house because it was his parents' house. Which is a note to me that just sounds so weird. And I can't understand why he would say that. And later he just threw that to the wind. He didn't care. But initially he's like, "Please don't smoke. It's my parents' house." I'm like, your parents are dead in the bedroom. What are you even talking about? But Anyways, though he had told people not to smoke, the house was not in the best state. There was a beer pong table set up inside. I believe it was in his living room, or it might have been in the kitchen. But either way, if you've ever played beer pong, you know that shit gets messy. And this was just inside his house. There was also kids just like laying all over the couches. They were in the kitchen, like getting food out of the cupboard and making food. They were like throwing beer cans on the lawn and just all over the house. People would drop glass bottles. They'd break. They'd be like, and just leave it. And they were like putting out cigarettes on the furniture. Because initially he's like, don't smoke in the house. And then he's like, wait a minute. If people are standing outside of the house in the front, they're gonna know there's a party going on, so everybody just stay in the house and smoke inside. I don't care. I just don't want the cops to get called. People are even just walking around inside selling different types of drugs. Like, this was honestly just like a popping off party. And again, Tyler wasn't worried about like the drugs, the disrespect to his house, any of that. All he was worried about was the noise, because he didn't want the cops to get called, because I'm assuming he knew, like, once the cops come, this is probably it for me. So let's keep this party rolling as long as possible. Fortunately for Tyler, his house was situated between two undeveloped lots. Remember I told you that it was a lot of swamp life? You'd be like a house, and then a vacant lot filled with like swamp life, like undeveloped, and then another house. Well, Tyler's house was sandwiched between two lots that were underdeveloped, so there wasn't a house there. So the chances of somebody like making a noise complaint was definitely less. However, a noise complaint did get made at one point. At about 2 a.m., the cops showed up at Tyler's house. That's because some people who had left, like, I think peeled out in like a neighbor's yard, and they were like, okay, this is about enough of this nonsense. So they called the cops, and then the cops showed up. They knocked on the door, and Tyler was like, everybody shut the fuck up. Go hide in the room. So they did, and Tyler answered the door, and he talked to the cops, and he was like, oh yeah, I was having a party. It's over. We're cool now. And the cops left, and as soon as the cops left, the party resumed. So it's crazy to think that like cops were already there once that night, and they would be back later eventually, but it's just wild. So anyways, during the party, people started to notice that there was like a couple of stains of reddish brown liquid all over the family computer, which is where they had been like shuffling through YouTube songs. Like they just go on there and put on a song on YouTube, and then everybody would switch it, and they're like, oh, that's weird. There's like stains all over this computer, and also in other places of the house. At one point when the kids were playing beer pong, one of the balls, the little beer pong balls, had bounced off the table, rolled onto the floor, and had landed in a puddle of like reddish brown goo. And the kid was like, oh, that's gross, and just took it to the sink and rinsed it off. I think that was probably blood, and he didn't even know, and that's so gnarly. Gnarly, gnarly, gnarly. In addition to the mess, the house is just described as smelling really gross. People said it smelled smelly, and there was like an odd, undefined smell that people thought was pretty gross, and one kid even joked, saying that it smelled like dead people. This was a joke that Tyler did not find very funny. Oh, one more thing. Something about this party to piss you off, as if all of this other stuff hasn't already pissed you off. Well, at this party, there were 2 dogs at this party, okay? These dicks were partying, having this rager with these dogs. And you know that dogs get like, if you don't know, dogs get like overwhelmed and scared with a lot of loud noise and loud people. And there were 2 dogs. There was one black lab, I believe it was, named Sophie. And the other dog was a partially deaf and partially blind, like old ass beagle. That makes me so mad. When the police arrived, Sophie was locked in a bedroom. I believe it was Ryan's old bedroom. Ryan didn't live there at the time. I don't know if I mentioned that, but it was Ryan's old bedroom. And at one point, the little beagle had been like hiding under the bed, just cowering. But when the police arrived, she was locked in the bathroom and was in the bathtub. This poor little beagle, poor little deaf and blind beagle with like 100 stupid drunk and high and effed up teenagers. That makes me so mad. Like, be better to dogs, okay? Also be better to people, but like people who are hurt animals, get the fuck out of here. Anyways, so I think Tyler wanted people at that party to know what he did, and during the party, he sort of started to like slip up incriminating information to partygoers, just like whoever would listen, just like, Tyler. He would tell people first that he threw the party because he wanted to have some fun before he left, or that he was going to go away for 60 years for doing something bad, or that he wanted to kill himself. Some kids at the party even had heard that he had either killed or hurt his parents in order to have the party. 2 of these kids had even called the cops after the party was over to report what they had heard. And I did hear the 911 calls on these. I was able to find them online. Anyways, yeah, I found him online. You can listen to these 911 calls, and it's like they waited till they were done partying, and then they left, and they're like, I don't know if this is an emergency. I don't know if this is bad, but this kid said this, and I don't know if it's true. They sounded like they didn't really believe it was true, but they called anyway, which is a good thing, that they eventually called. But the people at the party, when he would say it, they were just kind of like, ah, you cheeky little whippa, and then continued partying with this horrible, horrible kid. When people would ask him like, dude, like this is a sick party. How are you able to have this? Where are your parents? He would give different lies about where his parents were. Like they were in Georgia. They were in Orlando. They straight up didn't live there, or that they had died. So Tyler did end up trying to tell a friend about what he did. So his friend, this kid's name was Mark, was about to leave the party. On his way out, he's like, yo, can I like talk to you real quick privately? Like I'll walk you out. So they go outside. And he's like, okay, Mark, listen, I'm freaking out, bro. I'm really scared. I think I'm gonna go to jail. And Mark was like, what? Why? Why? And this is when Tyler told him, like, listen, I know you're not gonna believe me. No one's gonna believe me, but I killed somebody. And this guy, Mark, was like, nope, this is your business. You killing somebody, that is your business. And then he dipped right the fuck out of there. He was like, nope, not my problem, not dealing with this. Don't tell me that kind of stuff. And then he just left. So having failed at coming clean to his friend Mark, Tyler decided to turn to his best friend of over a decade, a kid named Michael Mandel. And he told Michael the whole story. He told Michael that he had beat them to death with a hammer and that they were still in the house. And at first Michael was like, what? No, silly guy. That's obviously not true. He didn't believe it. But then Tyler said to him, if you look hard enough, you will see the signs. This is when Michael started to kind of look around and put things together, notice all of those stains all over the house that people assumed were anything other than blood. But he was still a bit skeptical, so Tyler took him to the garage where he showed him a bloody footprint, and he then led him to his parents' bedroom where on the ground, like sort of, so there's the door, the ground in front of it, and like under the door, it looked like there was like a smear of dark something that looked like maybe an oil spill. And then Michael opened the bedroom door. He saw blood everywhere, all of the items that had been piled on top of the two bodies, like broken dishes, shattered glass, broken picture frames, bloody towels and pillowcases, a coffee table, books, a mop, wipes, everything all over on top of these bodies. And he said that he knew for sure it was true when he saw the leg of Tyler's father, Blake Hadley, sticking out from under the pile. He told his friend about what he had done. He told his friend about the lengthy cleanup process, and he told him about standing in the mirror and laughing to himself afterwards. After processing what he had just seen, the two boys went back to the garage where there was a bloody footprint so that they could be by themselves. While there, they decided to take a selfie together because Michael assumed this was going to be the last time he'd ever see Tyler, because Tyler had told him he was going to kill himself before police came. He also knew like he'd probably never get to see his friend again, and this would be the last photo they would ever take together. So they took a selfie, which I'm sure I have on the screen right now for you, and it's just a very, very odd thing to do after finding two dead people, but I mean, sure, go off. Michael and Tyler, I guess. It's kind of weird to me, but I mean, I've never been in that situation, and this was his best friend, so. By 3 a.m., all of the party guests had left because they had heard that there was another party at another house, like another rager. So everybody like went over to this house. And fun fact for you, apparently like it was a rumor and there wasn't really a party there. So all these people showed up like late at night, and the girl who lived there came outside and was like, what the are you guys doing here? But anyways, everybody dipped out of Tyler's party, and everybody except for Michael. Michael stayed a while. He stayed because he wanted to experience the last moments he ever had with his best friend, knowing full well that once he left, he was going to have to call the cops and report him. And he did just that. As soon as he left, he called Crime Stoppers and reported what Tyler had done, which I can't even imagine how hard that would be to report your best friend, but it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, okay? And on his way out, by the way, he took a bottle of Percocet and he hid it from Tyler because this is what Tyler planned to use to kill himself, so he hid them in an attempt to stop him from doing so. And the fact that Michael did stay for a while after discovering the bodies does seem a bit odd, you know, like, why would somebody do that? And he was questioned that. People were like, why the fuck didn't you just leave right away? And he said of this, and I quote, "If you were in my shoes and that guy was your best friend, you wouldn't want to leave right away. I know how heinous and sick this is, you know, what he did, but you wouldn't have ran away because you're comfortable with this guy. You don't see him as a killer. Which again, none of us are in this situation, so it's not our place to judge it. But he did call the cops, so it's, you know, he did the right thing. Apparently after the fact, after Tyler was arrested and everything, his association with Tyler, Michael's association with Tyler kind of ruined his life. He says he couldn't go to school without people being like, ah, that's the best friend of the murderer. But the two were best friends. They had been best friends since they were kids. They only lived a block away from each other. They had known each other such a long time. And like, he knew that Tyler was going down a bad path, and he knew that he talked about wanting to kill his parents, but he never took it as seriously, you know? And I don't feel like a lot of people would take their friends serious about something like that. He just, you know, always assumed that he was just really mad at his parents for punishing him and being strict with him. But he never expected this, which I do believe is true. And he says that it's just like being friends with Tyler and having this happen made it so he feels like he can never trust somebody again, and that you can never really know a person, which is sad, but very true. So finally the house was empty and Tyler seemed to be unraveling it. Even though he was losing it, for some reason, he went to Facebook again and he posted on his wall again at 4:40 a.m. Okay, people had just left this party. At 4:40 a.m. he posted, "Party at my house again. Hit me up." The sun was coming up. People were getting up for their morning coffee. He hadn't been to bed yet. He was also on drugs, I guess, but he's like, "Party at my house at 4:40 in the morning." But while this was happening, while he made this post, he didn't realize that police were outside his house as he typed that message. Police had shown up at about 4:30 and they were parked across the street and they were watching Tyler through the window, and they said that he just looked messed up. He looked freaked out and he was pacing back and forth across his living room. They had like a bay window and they could see him through the bay window. He was described as having wide eyes, unblinking, looking really, really scared, and he was like walking back and forth, going to a bookshelf, taking armfuls of books off the bookshelf, and he had been taking them in his parents' bedroom and just piling them on top of his parents' bodies. And like I said, I saw the crime scene photos and there was just so much stuff on top of them, and I'm wondering if like he was trying to hide them from view for like other people, or if maybe psychologically, I'm not a doctor, but maybe he was just trying to like bury and hide what he had done. So police ring the doorbell, and at first Tyler does not answer, but he instead turns off all the lights in the house, which is like not suspicious at all. So then he finally opens the door and police take him outside and they search him for weapons and they handcuff him and they go to try to go inside to search. And as soon as they try to step inside, he starts yelling. He's like, "No, no, you can't go in there. You can't go in there." He was described as frantic with giant pupils because ecstasy, my friends. So police go into the house and they start trying to clear the house, checking each room, and each room in that house was totally trash, but they keep checking, and finally they make it to the master bedroom. They open the door and they see blood everywhere. Inside the house, they also found evidence that maybe Tyler was a little mentally and emotionally unstable. They found the receipt from when he had stayed in that mental health facility. You know, they had to pay for it. There's a receipt for it, and they also found a bottle of Tyler's antidepressants. Tyler was arrested, obviously, and at first he pled not guilty to the charges, but then I believe he changed his plea to no contest. And he was 17 at the time, so he was not eligible for the death penalty, but he was eligible for life in prison without the possibility of parole. The funeral service for Mary-Jo and Blake Hadley had almost 1,000 people in attendance, which is just so wild to me, and it just shows just how much they were loved and how many people's lives they had touched, because I'm telling you, I don't even know 100 people, so I can't imagine 1,000 people showing up for me, you know what I mean? Like, that is impressive. Tyler's brother Ryan, who was 23 at the time of the murders, was just absolutely crushed. He loved his parents. He loved and respected his father. He was in college at the time, and he planned to return back home after he had graduated and to work alongside his father at the power plant. So he was just like devastated. And the day of the funeral, after the funeral, he was actually going to leave the funeral and drive over to the jail to see Tyler, to visit Tyler. He hadn't seen him since the murders. And when asked why he was going to go visit him, he said, and I quote, "It's what my parents would want me to do. They wouldn't want me to abandon him. I don't know what I'm going to say. I'll probably just sit there and cry." While awaiting trial, Tyler wrote a letter to one of his sets of grandparents. I believe they were Mary-Jo's parents, expressing how he felt and what was going through his mind at the time. And I'm going to read a little bit of that for you now. "I was just living my life as a normal 17-year-old kid, and next thing I know, I'm in the middle of St. Lucie County Jail. I ruined a lot of people's lives, and I can't seem to forgive myself. I find myself crying a lot because of all the guilt. Every day I beg for forgiveness, and I ask God not to send me to hell. I don't want to go there. Father Michael told me that if I just confess my sins and repent, then God will forgive me for everything. I just can't get rid of all this guilt. It's swallowing me whole. I'm extremely nervous that I'm going to get a life sentence. It's making me pretty depressed. I want to say I'm really sorry for all the grief I've stirred up. I know everyone thinks I'm a psychopath and all, but I really am sorry for everything. I've been praying every day for forgiveness and for a decent plea offer. I should get one since it's my first offense. I feel extremely bad for Ryan, and especially you and my other grandparents, for the grief I've caused. I feel like Ryan doesn't love me anymore, but I know he does, and he's just going through a rough time. It's so hard going through this. I'm scared and I feel so alone. But don't feel too bad for him yet, because apparently while in jail awaiting his trial, he told another inmate that he had been planning this party for weeks. He bragged about it a bit and was like, "Oh man, you should have been there. It was an awesome party." They went to their awesome party and listened to awesome music and just sat around and soaked in each other's awesomeness. Also, another inmate, it might have been the same inmate, either way, an inmate who was in jail with him at the time also said that he considered himself sort of a celebrity in jail, and he would sign his letters Hammer Boy or Hambo, and this is how he referred to himself, so doesn't sound like he feels that bad. At Tyler's trial, his older brother Ryan testified, I believe it was for the prosecution, for about an hour, and when asked by the court what he wanted to happen to his brother, he said, "Well, I want him to get the maximum sentence possible, which I understand is life in prison without the possibility of parole." And you could see, because I saw a video of this as well, that this was really hard for him. You could tell like he had a lot of trouble doing what he did, but he did it, so good for him. What a strong guy, because like I can't imagine what he was feeling and what he had gone through. After a 9-day trial in 2014, Tyler was sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The judge called the crime brutal, heinous, and premeditated, which it was all of those things. In 2016, Tyler's sentence was overturned on appeal because there was a new ruling in 2012 that worked retroactively that banned mandatory life sentences for minors convicted of murder. The court ruled that the initial judge in this case did not consider the correct alternative to a life sentence. Disagree, but okay. During his resentencing hearing, Tyler read a letter to his family members who were present in the court, and of these family members were family members of his father's that he had not had to face since murdering Blake Hadley in 2011, and the letter read as follows. "Words cannot explain the amount of remorse and sorrow over my actions that have affected so many people, but most of all my family, who I still care about greatly. In the past, I have lied and tried to manipulate. I lost the trust of those closest to me. I made the decision several years ago that I don't want to be that person anymore. I strive daily to better myself. I still don't understand myself and the reasons for my atrocious actions. I really don't know. Contrary to what anyone else may tell you, I'm telling you the truth. For me to try to explain would be like making excuses, and there is no excuse. What I can tell you is how sorry I am, how I wish it never happened. I'm sorry to my brother, my grandparents, and the rest of my family and my parents' friends. I'm sorry that I took them away from you." Mike Hadley, who was Blake's brother, testified at court and urged the judge to keep Tyler, his nephew, in prison for life. He spoke for his family alongside his wife and his sister, which was also Blake's sister, and he spoke to reporters and he said, and I quote, "We feel like this is the 3rd funeral we've gone through. Even though we love our nephew Tyler, we know he's done a terrible thing." He mentioned also that he knew that Tyler was mature enough at the time of the murders that he knew that what he was doing was wrong, and he knew that he was going to have to pay the price for it. He even talked about how Tyler had planned this murder so much that he had actually done a freaking, like a dress rehearsal of the murders the night before the murders. And this is something that I didn't even know until he was being resentenced, and this came out when he was talking to reporters, because apparently he like planned it, tried it out, had thought about using some like gardening shears, these giant shears, and then changed his mind and decided the best weapon to use would be the claw hammer. Mike said again, "So he chooses a carpenter hammer. I'm sure he looked at the hammer and thought to himself, what would be the best side to use to murder my parents? So he used the claw end of it." And that statement is just like chilling to me, to be honest. I can't imagine having to know that that's how your brother died. Like, anyone you love, knowing that's how anyone you love died. It was clearly premeditated. How could it not have been to methodically plan and then carry out an attack of such gruesome consequences, and then at the end of it all, laugh about it and celebrate and throw a party. Though the judge had the option to give Tyler the minimum sentence, which would have been 40 years, in the end, he was resentenced, and again, he was given life in prison, but this time he was given the possibility of parole after 25 years. These sentences are to be served consecutively, which essentially means that he's serving both at the same time. So he doesn't get to do 25 years parole and then do 25 more years. He's just doing them at the same time, which is frustrating, but that's what he got. So I don't know. But apparently his defense attorney said that she is going to appeal to get a lighter sentence still, because she still thinks it's too much for what he did. The presiding judge at the second trial, his name was Judge Sweet. He said of Tyler and his crimes and his character, and I quote, "The defendant displayed perverse premeditation, heartless cruelty, and savagery, extreme violence, a willingness to mutilate, and absolute depravity. Considering the victims were blood relatives and were killed up close and personally with a handheld tool, it's obvious the defendant was fueled by a long, simmering, passionate hatred towards those who loved him the most." Sick burn. And that, my friends, is the story of Tyler Hadley and his killer party. What do you think? I think it is absolutely wild. My brain cannot comprehend looking at your parents, the people who loved you and raised you and gave up everything for you. Parents give up so much, like good parents give up so much for their children, to look at them and be like, I'm gonna murder you. And then to actually do it, and then before doing it, having like a dress rehearsal of it, that is unimaginable to me. It's so far removed from something I would do. You know what I mean? He just had so many opportunities to change his mind, and Tyler was clearly planning this for a while, or at least toying with the idea of actually doing it, because he told so many people so many times in the weeks leading up to their murders that he wanted them dead. In a text message with some girl, and I couldn't tell if this was his girlfriend or just somebody that maybe they liked each other, but the text seemed a little bit flirty, but either way, he texted her and he said that his mom was a cunt and that he wanted her dead and he was gonna kill her, and her response was just like, oh my God, no, you'll go to jail. And he said, and I quote, oh well, and then gave her like the little heart, like a V3, ice cream cone heart. And this clearly wasn't a spur of the moment crime. Like, he planned this for a while, you know? He told a bunch of people about it. He waited to commit the murders until his brother Ryan had moved out of the house. I think I mentioned that, but I can't remember. But his brother had just moved out, and I believe he had just moved out of state. So he said he waited until Ryan left to do it. He did a trial run of the murders and like carefully chose the weapon, deciding, you know, the shears aren't the right one. I'm gonna go with a hammer. And then he hid his parents' cell phones so that they couldn't call for help. And plus, he planned the party before they were dead. The only way the party could happen is if they were gone. And also, he had been hanging out with a friend. I believe it was just 2 days before the murders. This friend, I believe, didn't end up at the party, but he told his friend they were like hanging out talking, and just randomly he was like, man, I would love to kill my parents and then have a huge party, because I don't think anyone's ever done that before. Okay, and it's so up because so many kids knew that he was planning to do this and had been talking about doing this, and though I'm sure most of them didn't think he was serious, some of them I believe did, and even engaged with him on it and encouraged it. I saw some text between him and this other 17-year-old kid named Matt, and Matt had texted him and said, did you do it? And Tyler was like, not yet. And he's like, you really should do it. You really should do it. And Tyler was like, don't worry, I'm gonna, and then I'm gonna have a big party afterwards. Another friend, some stupid girl, was interviewed after the fact, and I'm sorry if you think me calling her stupid is rude, but when you hear what she said, you will understand. She was interviewed and she's like, well, you know, they were really hard on him and they wouldn't let him be himself, and he was under a lot of pressure, and they really did cause everything that happened. Shut up, little girl. Just shut your mouth. And then another friend blamed everything that happened on drugs and took Tyler, like Tyler wasn't responsible, it was the drugs, because Tyler drank heavily, smoked pot, and popped pills like a madman. So it was all of that, not Tyler himself. So he wasn't responsible. Some of these kids are just absolute shitbags. Most of all, Tyler. Obviously, he's the one who actually murdered his parents, but it's just so sad to imagine that all of these people knew, could have done something, and chose not to. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, but there's a special place in hell for victim blamers. Like, to literally say it's the parents' fault that they're dead for, I'm sorry, parenting? I know these are just kids and kids are dumb. Like, I get it. But these kids, some of them need to be slapped. I just feel so bad for Ryan, man, losing his whole family like that. Can you even imagine? And I know he's not, I don't know where he is now. I know he's not living in that house. I really doubt he'd want to. But in 2015, the family home was demolished. According to an article I read, the house was bought by the bank without realizing that there was a history behind it. And they had already started renovations. And as soon as they realized what had happened, they stopped immediately. They had all their new appliances removed that had just been installed during the renovation, and they hired a contractor to demolish the home. As the house was knocked down, neighbors looked out their windows, they stood on the street, they drove over and just watched the walls fall. The walls that had been covered in the Hadley's blood crumbling to the ground. So the house is gone, his family's gone. It's just, he's like completely alone when it comes to his immediate family. So I hope that he's at least close with his extended family at this point, or at least that he has some sort of support system in general, just because I can't imagine how he deals, the trauma of it all. It's just like a lot to even imagine handling. And then I wonder, like, if he still talks to Tyler, because before he did it, because he said that's what his parents would want, but I wonder if he still does. It's just, it's why I gotta stop thinking about it. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope that it was informative and interesting and gave you every bit of information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I hope you enjoyed it, because I want you to enjoy everything I'm putting out into the world. That's why I do it. And also just thank you for sitting around and remembering Blake and Mary-Jo with me today, because they just sounded like awesome people and like good parents who tried their best. And what Tyler did was just fucked up, man. And like, that's just basically it. Like, what happened to them, they didn't deserve, and Tyler's a dick. If you like wine and it is in your budget, I would really appreciate any support on the Bright Cellars sponsorship, because the thing with sponsorships is, if people actually get it, I'm more likely to get other ones with them and with other people, and I appreciate every bit of support. And of course, I just want to have some fun and have like a little wine night with you. I'm going to do that regardless, even if I don't sell any, I'm still going to do it. But if we have wines to drink together, I think that'd be pretty fun too. Please let me know of any cases you would like to see me cover down below, because as you know, I have a very long list of cases. But every time you leave, when I add it to my list, I add your name next to it so I can give you a shout out, because I'm very interested in the cases that you're into, because I know you're filled with good taste and good ideas. Otherwise, you would not be here. If you have not already, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell, because I put out a new Morbid makeup video every single week, and I'd love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out on a more consistent basis, you can follow me on both Instagram and Twitter. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, like my namesake here, and I have a Facebook page and a Facebook group. The page is BRATTERSTEIN, and the group is Morbid Makeup True Crime. So if you want to hang out there, go for it. All of those platforms, you get kind of sneak peeks of videos that are coming up. I put up polls to see if they're videos you want to see or if they're killers you know about, so you'll kind of get an idea of what's to come, mostly on Instagram. Instagram's where I'm most active, if I'm real with you. I don't know why I blew you a kiss, but maybe it's just because you're looking pretty cute today. But anyways, guys, with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That's tight. You're tight. Please be a better person than you were yesterday. Be better than Tyler Hadley, please, at the bare minimum. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.